Have you ever walked away from a conversation thinking, why didn't I say it the way I imagined it in my head? Most people struggle not because they lack intelligence, but because their inner thoughts are a tangled web. Imagine, though, being part of the rare 1% who can express themselves with striking clarity. The kind of clarity that makes people pause, listen, and remember your words. The secret to articulation does not begin with your tongue, it begins in your mind. Words are only the shadow of your inner vision. If your thoughts are vague, your sentences will stumble. But if you can picture your idea vividly, like a scene unfolding before your eyes, your speech becomes effortless because you're simply describing what you already see. Equally important is the energy behind your words. People don't just absorb your vocabulary, they absorb the conviction you carry. Speak from a place of feeling, and your message will cut through noise more than polished grammar ever could. Another powerful shift is to speak as though you are already understood. When you approach your message with certainty, when you live in the end of clear communication, you naturally simplify structure and emphasize in a way that reaches people. Pay attention to the conversations you hold with yourself in silence. That is where articulation is born. If your self-talk is cluttered, doubtful, or scattered, your spoken words will reflect it. Train your inner dialogue to be precise, calm, and assured, and your external speech will carry the same quality. And finally, trust your words. The best communicators do not over-explain or chase perfection. They believe their message is enough, and that belief shapes how the audience receives it. Clarity begins within, and before you can speak clearly, you must first learn to think clearly. The quality of your speech is always a reflection of the quality of your inner world. Your words are not random sounds, they are the outflow of the pictures, images, and structures that you hold in the mind. If the inner vision is chaotic, vague, or incomplete, then the words you release into the world will naturally carry that same lack of precision. When you struggle to explain yourself, it is rarely because you lack vocabulary or intelligence. It is because the thought you are trying to share has not yet been crystallized inside you. The clearer you see something inwardly, the more effortlessly you will articulate it outwardly. To understand this truth, think of the mind as a projector. Whatever image is placed before the lens is what will be cast onto the screen. If the image is sharp, well-defined, and filled with detail, the projection will also be sharp and compelling. But if the image itself is blurred, the projection can never be any clearer. Words are simply the projection of thought, and articulation is nothing more than describing the picture that lives in your mind. Therefore, if you want to speak with clarity, you must first train yourself to think in images that are vivid, precise, and meaningful. Most people attempt to communicate without this inner clarity. They reach for words while their mind is still foggy, hoping that speaking will somehow create understanding. The result is hesitation, filler language, and a lack of impact. The secret is to reverse the process, build the clarity inside first, and then let words follow naturally. This is why the most powerful communicators are often described as people who paint pictures with words. They are not simply stringing phrases together. They are revealing what they already see with perfect sharpness in their imagination. Cultivating inner clarity requires a shift in how you approach your thoughts. Instead of letting them drift as vague sensations or half-formed notions, you discipline your mind to hold a single idea until it becomes complete. For example, if you want to explain an idea to someone, do not rush immediately to speak it. First ask yourself, what is the essence of what I want to share? What is the central image? If I could only describe it in one sentence, what would that sentence be? This kind of inner questioning forces the scattered cloud of thought to gather into a single beam of light. Once that beam is formed, speaking it aloud becomes almost effortless. Another way to develop this inner clarity is through visualization. If you want to describe a concept, scenario, or even an emotion, close your eyes and build a picture of it in your mind. See it in detail, the shapes, the movement, the relationships between its parts. The clearer you see it, the easier it will be to describe it to others. A speaker who has rehearsed the picture in imagination speaks with a natural authority because they are no longer groping for words. They are simply narrating what they already perceive. Inner clarity is also inseparable from self-awareness. Many people speak without realizing how much their own conflicting emotions and beliefs cloud their message. If you hold doubt about what you are saying, your words will stumble. If you are half convinced, your sentences will carry hesitation. But if you have aligned your thoughts, emotions, and intentions into a single, coherent state, then clarity pours out of you without effort. This is why those who are deeply convicted of their message speak with such striking impact. Their words carry no contradiction, because their inner world is unified around one vision. The practice of journaling can also sharpen this inner clarity. When you write your thoughts on paper, you are forced to give them form, structure, and order. What feels like a jumble in your head becomes a sequence of words that you can examine, refine, and simplify. The more you practice this discipline, the more your inner pictures sharpen, and the more articulate you become when speaking spontaneously. Writing, therefore, is not just a tool for expression. It is a training ground for thought. It is equally important to recognize that silence is part of clarity. Many people rush to speak, filling every gap with words out of fear that silence will expose them. But silence gives you space to sharpen the picture inside before projecting it outward. The ability to pause, to gather your thought into one clear image, is the mark of a powerful communicator. When you speak after such a pause, your words carry weight because they emerge from stillness and intention, not from anxiety. Clarity within also demands that you guard the quality of ideas you allow into your mind. If you constantly consume scattered, shallow, or contradictory information, your inner pictures will reflect that disarray, and your speech will mirror the same confusion. On the other hand, if you choose to dwell on ideas that are simple, profound, and consistent, your inner world will naturally organize itself with greater sharpness. This inner order expresses itself in outer clarity. To articulate more clearly than most people, you must recognize that communication is not primarily about language, but about vision. Language is secondary. The true power lies in the inner clarity from which the language springs. Think of the greatest speakers in history. They were not admired for fancy vocabulary, but for the unmistakable clarity of vision that animated their words. Their listeners could see the picture, feel the conviction, and remember the essence long after the speech ended. Therefore, the starting point is always within. You cannot give what you do not have. If you attempt to speak from a foggy mind, your listeners will receive fog. If you hold a radiant inner picture, your listeners will feel its light. The outer word is the servant of the inner image, and the sharper the image, the sharper the speech. Imagination shapes expression. And when you form a vivid image of what you want to communicate, your words naturally organize themselves to match that image. Every act of speech begins long before sound leaves your lips. It begins in the quiet theater of your mind where thoughts and images are arranged, rehearsed, and animated. The imagination is not a passive faculty. It is the very architect of communication. Whatever picture you allow to form within will dictate the rhythm, tone, and precision of the words that follow. If the inner picture is dull or incomplete, your words will stumble, but if the image is alive and vivid, your language flows with an almost effortless clarity. Think of a storyteller describing an event. The ones who captivate us are not necessarily those with the most advanced vocabulary, but those who can see what they are describing as if it were happening before their eyes. Because they see it, they can show it. Their words are simply the brushstrokes used to paint the picture that already exists vividly in imagination. This is why their stories feel real, textured, and compelling. They are not inventing sentences. They are reporting on a living vision. In contrast, someone who cannot see what they are trying to communicate resorts to vague phrases, repetitions, or fillers, leaving their listeners confused. Imagination, therefore, acts as a blueprint. Just as an architect does not begin to build a house without first seeing the design clearly on paper, you cannot expect to communicate powerfully without first forming a clear image of your message. Once the image is fixed, the structure of your language arranges itself around it. The human mind is naturally drawn to order. When it sees an inner pattern, it seeks to replicate that pattern in expression. That is why the most vivid speakers often say their words just came out. In truth, the words were not random. They were summoned and organized by the clarity of the mental picture. Consider the way children explain things. When a child tries to describe a toy or a dream, they often speak with a raw enthusiasm that is contagious. Their words are not perfect, yet their communication often feels alive because their imagination is lit up. They can see it, and so they speak it. The purity of their inner image compensates for any lack of technical language. This is proof that vivid imagination shapes expression even when vocabulary is limited. On the other hand, adults often have larger vocabularies but duller inner pictures, and so their explanations feel flat. The power of imagination in shaping expression also explains why great communicators rehearse internally before delivering a message. They walk through the scene in their minds, seeing the reactions, feeling the atmosphere, and shaping the flow before uttering a single word. By the time they speak, their words are aligned with the image they have already lived in imagination. It is not memorization. It is embodiment. They are simply recounting what has already been seen and felt on the inner stage. This principle can be applied to any form of communication, whether you are giving a presentation, writing an essay, or having a heartfelt conversation. Before speaking, pause and form the image of what you truly want to convey. If you are explaining a process, imagine each step clearly. If you are sharing an idea, see the idea as a scene or symbol. If you are telling a story, replay the story vividly in your mind, noticing details of color, motion, and emotion. The more vividly you form it, the more naturally your words will assemble themselves into a coherent sequence. Imagination not only shapes the words you choose, but also the emotional tone with which you deliver them. When the image you hold is vivid, it stirs feeling, and that feeling enters your voice, your gestures, and your timing. Audiences do not respond only to logical structure, they respond to the life that flows through words. That life is generated by imagination. A flat image produces flat speech, while a living image produces living expression. The difference between a dull explanation and a memorable one is not the grammar, but the vividness of the inner scene. Another dimension of this truth is that imagination simplifies complexity. Many people struggle to communicate because their ideas feel overwhelming. But when you reduce the complexity into a single clear picture, the expression becomes simple. For example, if you are trying to explain teamwork, rather than juggling abstract definitions, imagine a group of rowers moving in harmony on a boat. Once you see this, your words naturally align. You speak of rhythm, coordination, trust, and shared motion. The vivid image guides your language, ensuring clarity where there might otherwise be confusion. Imagination also acts as a bridge between speaker and listener. When you describe something vividly enough, you invite the listener to form the same picture in their mind. Communication at its highest is not just about transferring information, but about transferring imagery. When both minds are seeing the same image, understanding is effortless. This is why metaphors and analogies are so powerful. They are simply tools to translate your inner image into a form the listener can also see. Developing the habit of using imagination consciously can transform your ability to articulate. Rather than beginning with words and hoping they create meaning, begin with meaning in the form of a picture and let words arise to match. This requires practice, but it is deeply rewarding. Spend time visualizing what you want to say before you say it. Close your eyes, picture it, feel it, and then let your speech follow. With time, this process becomes natural, and you will find that your words carry coherence and depth without effort. In truth, imagination is not merely a tool for expression. It is the very source of it. Every poem, every speech, every conversation that has ever stirred hearts began as a vivid inner picture. The power to speak clearly, persuasively, and memorably is not hidden in dictionaries or grammar books. It is hidden in the ability to see with the mind's eye, and to let language flow as the shadow of that vision. Feeling the idea is the difference between words that are heard and words that are remembered. Words without felt conviction are hollow, like shells without life inside them. They may be grammatically correct, even impressive in vocabulary, but they do not reach the heart of the listener. When you connect emotionally with your idea, your communication transcends the level of logic and moves into the realm of impact. People don't just hear you, they feel you, and feeling is what lingers long after the details are forgotten. Every act of communication carries two dimensions: the surface of the words and the energy beneath them. The surface can be polished, but if the energy is absent, the message collapses into emptiness. The human mind is sensitive enough to perceive when words are empty and when they are alive with conviction. This is why someone with modest speaking skills can often outshine a technically trained speaker. The difference lies in the degree of feeling infused into the idea. Feeling is what gives words their weight and authority. When you speak from emotion, your words vibrate differently. Your tone changes, your rhythm shifts, your pauses become intentional, and your gestures align naturally. None of this is forced. It arises because the body follows the current of emotion. When you feel your idea, your whole being becomes an instrument of expression, and this authenticity cannot be faked. Audiences instinctively respond to it because they sense it is real. They may not remember your exact phrasing, but they remember how you made them feel, and that memory shapes their perception of you and your message. To truly feel an idea, you must first allow it to take root in you. You cannot expect others to feel what you have not felt yourself. This means spending time not only understanding the idea intellectually, but experiencing it inwardly. For example, if you are speaking about resilience, do not merely define resilience with abstract terms. Recall a moment in your own life when you had to rise after a setback. Let yourself relive the emotions of that moment. The struggle, the doubt, the determination, and the triumph. Once you feel it, your words about resilience carry a power they never could if you treated the subject only as theory. Feeling also creates a bridge between you and your listeners. Human beings are wired for empathy. When you communicate with genuine emotion, others unconsciously mirror that emotion within themselves. This mirroring is what makes your message contagious. A speaker who speaks with cold detachment may be understood, but not embraced, while a speaker who speaks with warmth, passion, or urgency transmits those very states into the hearts of the audience. The connection goes beyond intellect and enters the realm of shared experience, which is far more persuasive. Another reason feeling is essential is that it sharpens clarity. When you are emotionally invested in an idea, you automatically simplify and emphasize what matters most. Emotion acts as a filter, stripping away the unnecessary and highlighting the essence. Think of how people describe experiences they love. A parent speaking about their child, an artist speaking about their craft, a traveler speaking about a cherished memory. Their words flow easily, often without preparation, because the emotional connection provides structure and meaning. The passion organizes the language for them. To cultivate this ability, practice entering into the emotional state of your idea before expressing it. If you are preparing to speak about courage, spend time imagining the feeling of courage in your own body. What it feels like to stand firm in the face of fear. If you are discussing creativity, dwell on the joy and excitement you feel when new ideas come alive in your mind. This is not about exaggerating emotions, but about authentically reconnecting with the feeling behind the idea. Once you are in that state, your words will flow as an expression of it. It is also important to remember that different ideas carry different emotional tones. Not every message demands fiery passion. Some require gentleness, calm, or quiet conviction. Feeling the idea does not mean amplifying emotion for its own sake, but aligning with the natural emotion that belongs to the idea itself. A heartfelt apology, for example, does not require dramatic energy, but rather sincerity and humility. A call to action may demand urgency and fire. The key is congruence, the alignment of the emotion with the message being delivered. Feeling your idea also requires trust. Many communicators hold back their emotions out of fear of being judged, appearing too vulnerable, or losing composure. But in holding back, they rob their words of power. Audiences respond to courage, and there is a deep courage in allowing yourself to feel openly in front of others. Vulnerability is not weakness. It is one of the strongest forms of connection because it shows your humanity. When you let yourself truly feel, you invite your audience to feel with you, and in that shared space, real transformation occurs. Finally, feeling is what makes communication memorable. Logic may persuade temporarily, but feeling anchors the message in memory. Think of the moments in your life when someone spoke to you in a way you never forgot. Chances are it was not the precision of their grammar or the sophistication of their arguments that left the impression. It was the way their words carried emotion, the way you felt understood, inspired, or moved. This is the legacy of feeling. It imprints your words onto the hearts of others in a way that no purely intellectual message can accomplish. Living in the end of the thought is the art of speaking from the state of already knowing your message is understood. It is the assumption that clarity and connection are already achieved before you utter the first word, and this assumption frames your entire delivery with confidence and power. Most communicators approach expression with uncertainty, wondering whether others will understand them, worrying about whether they are saying things the right way, or fearing that their ideas will fall flat. This inner hesitation leaks into their words, creating a delivery that feels tentative, unsure, or overly complicated. The transformative shift comes when you begin with the end in mind, assuming that your audience already grasps your meaning and is open to receiving it. This state is not arrogance but alignment. It is not about forcing others to accept your message. It is about embodying the conviction that your words carry clarity and that understanding flows naturally between you and those listening. When you begin with this assumption, your energy changes. You no longer speak as someone pleading for attention or validation, but as someone calmly sharing what is already true. The subtle shift in tone, body language, and rhythm creates an atmosphere of authority without effort. People instinctively lean into voices that sound assured, because assurance signals that the speaker has already walked the path of understanding and is now simply inviting others to join. Living in the end of the thought requires cultivating inner certainty before external expression. Instead of rehearsing fears about whether your audience will follow you, you rehearse the feeling of having already connected with them. You picture the nods of agreement, the attentive eyes, the sense of resonance. You assume the transmission of your idea has already succeeded, and when you step into speech, you carry that resonance within you. Listeners pick up on this inner state. Humans are highly attuned to subtle cues, and when you embody confidence, they interpret it as a sign that what you are saying is worth their attention. This practice is deeply practical. Consider how people often communicate during job interviews, presentations, or even personal conversations. If they are dominated by doubt, what if they don't get it? What if I sound foolish? Their language becomes defensive or cluttered. They over-explain, circle around the point, or fill the silence with unnecessary words. But if they enter the conversation with the assumption that the listener already understands and values what is being said, their words become simpler, more direct, and more powerful. They no longer feel the need to compensate because they are speaking from the end where the message has already landed successfully. Living in the end also reshapes your body language. When you assume you are understood, your gestures become natural rather than forced. You move with calm assurance, not nervous fidgeting. Your eye contact is steady because you are not searching for signs of approval. You are sharing from completion. This congruence between thought, speech, and body communicates far more than words alone. Audiences do not only hear language, they feel alignment, and alignment creates trust. To develop this habit, practice shifting your inner dialogue. Before speaking, instead of asking, "Will they understand me?" ask, "What does it feel like to already be understood?" Then step into that feeling. Imagine that your message has already landed, that clarity already exists in the space, and that you are simply unveiling it. This shift changes not just the words you use, but the spirit in which you use them. It makes your communication less about convincing and more about revealing, which is always more powerful. This principle also applies to teaching, leading, or inspiring others. Great leaders often speak as if the vision they describe is already reality. They embody the state of completion before the outer proof arrives. Because they speak from the end, their words carry a creative force that draws others into that end. In personal communication, this same approach inspires confidence in others. When you speak as though understanding is a given, people are more likely to step into that state with you, mirroring your assumption and experiencing the clarity you presuppose. Living in the end of the thought also simplifies your message. When you assume you are understood, you no longer clutter your communication with disclaimers, justifications, or excessive repetition. You deliver the essence directly, with trust that it is received. This simplicity is magnetic because it respects the intelligence of your audience. People rise to the level of confidence you extend to them. If you treat them as though they cannot follow you, you unconsciously diminish your own clarity. But if you treat them as though they are already aligned with you, you elevate the entire exchange. Another benefit of this practice is the calm it produces within you. Speaking from uncertainty is exhausting because it requires constant monitoring of how your words are being received. You become hyper-aware of facial expressions, tone, or silence, interpreting them as signs of approval or rejection. But when you live in the end of the thought, you release the need to manage every reaction. You rest in the assumption of connection, and this allows your delivery to flow freely. The absence of tension makes your words sound natural, and naturalness is one of the most persuasive qualities any communicator can possess. It is also worth noting that living in the end of the thought is not limited to formal communication. It transforms everyday interactions. Whether you are speaking with a friend, partner, or colleague, when you assume mutual understanding, you create an atmosphere of trust. Instead of bracing for misunderstanding, you rest in the certainty of clarity, and that certainty often becomes self-fulfilling. Your confidence removes barriers, allowing others to meet you in that state. Ultimately, speaking from the end of the thought is about embodying the reality of connection before it outwardly appears. It is about choosing to dwell in the state of already being understood, already being received, and already being clear. This state frames every word, gesture, and tone, filling them with a quiet power that cannot be manufactured by technique alone. By living in the end internally, you invite the outer world to reflect that inner certainty, and in this alignment, communication becomes not a struggle but a natural flow. Inner dialogue as training ground is one of the most overlooked yet powerful principles in communication. The way you converse with yourself silently is the rehearsal for how you speak outwardly. Every sentence you utter to the world is a reflection of the countless silent sentences you have been rehearsing in your own mind. If your inner words are confused, scattered, or doubtful, your outer speech will inevitably echo that confusion. If your inner dialogue is clear, steady, and confident, Your outer expression will naturally carry the same clarity and assurance. Most people believe they prepare for communication only in moments of practice, writing notes before a presentation, rehearsing lines before an interview, or mentally planning what to say before a conversation. In truth, you are always preparing, whether you realize it or not. Every time you speak to yourself inwardly, you are shaping patterns of expression. The questions you ask yourself, the statements you repeat, and the tone you use in your silent conversations all carve grooves in your mind. Over time, those grooves become the natural channels through which your outward speech flows. Consider the person whose inner dialogue is dominated by self-doubt. They silently repeat thoughts like, "What if I mess this up?" or "I don't know if I can explain this well." These inner rehearsals train their mind to associate speaking with hesitation. When they finally open their mouth, the tone of hesitation leaks into their delivery. Long pauses, filler words, apologetic phrases, and a lack of confidence. They may not realize it, but their outward speech is only echoing the inward rehearsal they have been running repeatedly. Now contrast this with someone who trains their inner dialogue consciously. They may tell themselves, "I have something valuable to share," or "My words are clear and my message is received." This inner rehearsal does not just soothe their nerves, it creates a mental pathway of confidence. When the moment of expression comes, they speak with assurance because they have already practiced speaking with assurance internally. Their speech is grounded, their tone is steady, and their words are free from clutter. Inner dialogue also shapes not just the confidence but the content of your communication. If your silent thoughts are fragmented, your outer explanations will be fragmented. For example, if you attempt to describe an idea but your inner dialogue keeps jumping between unrelated thoughts, your audience will feel the same lack of structure. But if your inner dialogue is disciplined, if you can hold a single line of thought without scattering, you will find that your words naturally follow a coherent flow. Clear inner dialogue trains you to produce clear outer speech. This is why many great communicators spend time cultivating mental clarity through practices such as journaling, meditation, or visualization. Journaling externalizes inner dialogue, allowing you to see its patterns and refine them. Meditation quiets the mental chatter, training you to release unhelpful loops of confusion or doubt. Visualization allows you to rehearse success inwardly, picturing yourself speaking clearly and confidently before the event occurs. Each of these practices refines the training ground of inner dialogue, ensuring that when the time comes to speak, your words emerge from a place of order rather than chaos. It is also important to recognize that inner dialogue is not only about what you say to yourself, but how you say it. Tone matters even in silence. Some people speak inwardly in harsh, critical tones, constantly scolding themselves. Others speak inwardly with encouragement, patience, and kindness. The tone of your inner dialogue seeps into the tone of your outer dialogue. If you habitually berate yourself internally, your outer words often carry a subtle edge of defensiveness or harshness. If you encourage yourself inwardly, your speech tends to be warmer, more welcoming, and more inspiring. Training your inner dialogue requires awareness. Begin by noticing the phrases you repeat silently. Are they cluttered with doubt? Do they assume failure? Do they reinforce confusion? Once you notice, you can consciously replace them with words that align with clarity and confidence. This is not about blind affirmation, but about deliberately choosing inner rehearsals that support the kind of communicator you want to become. Over time, these new inner patterns become natural, and your outward speech changes effortlessly. Another aspect of this training ground is imagery. Inner dialogue is not limited to words, it often includes the pictures you hold in mind. If you constantly imagine yourself stumbling, forgetting, or being misunderstood, your speech will unconsciously bend toward that expectation. But if you picture yourself standing tall, speaking with clarity, and being understood, your words will begin to shape themselves around that image. The mind does not distinguish sharply between imagination and reality. Whatever you rehearse inwardly becomes the pattern you express outwardly. Even silence within your dialogue plays a role. If your inner world is filled with noise, clutter, and endless commentary, your outer communication will likely feel rushed or scattered. But if you cultivate stillness, your words will emerge with calm authority. The pauses in your inner dialogue give space for clarity to form, and those same pauses translate into powerful moments of emphasis in your outer speech. Silence is not emptiness. It is part of the training ground that gives depth to expression. Ultimately, the way you converse with yourself creates the foundation for every word you speak. The inner stage is where rehearsal takes place, and the outer world is simply the performance of what you have been practicing all along. If you want to improve your outward communication, you must first master your inner dialogue. By refining the words, tone, and images you use silently, you condition your mind to speak with clarity, confidence, and conviction whenever the moment arises. In this way, every silent conversation becomes a rehearsal for the powerful words you will one day share with others. Faith in your words is the foundation of clarity in communication. Clarity does not come from endlessly piling explanations on top of one another, nor from trying to cover every possible angle in fear of being misunderstood. True clarity emerges when you trust that the words you have chosen are enough. It is the quiet conviction that meaning can travel directly from your mind to another through simple, deliberate expression. When you believe in the sufficiency of your words, your audience rises to meet that belief, stretching their attention and imagination to grasp your meaning. Over-explaining is a symptom of doubt. It often comes from the fear that people will not understand you, so you attempt to add more words, more examples, and more layers until the original message becomes diluted. Ironically, the more you over-explain, the less clear your message becomes, because it drowns under the weight of unnecessary details. The most powerful communicators are rarely those who speak the most, but those who speak with such faith in their words that each sentence carries weight. Their trust in language invites listeners to lean in, to fill in the gaps, and to engage actively with the message. When you speak with faith in your words, you are sending a subtle signal to your audience. I trust you to understand. This signal does more than convey information. It affirms the intelligence and capability of your listeners. People often rise to the level of expectation set for them. If you treat them as though they cannot grasp your meaning, they may disengage or grow impatient. But if you treat them as though they are fully capable of comprehension, they will focus more intently, striving to meet the belief you have extended. In this sense, faith in your words is also faith in the audience. This principle can be seen clearly in teaching. A teacher who over-explains every concept, fearing that students will not understand, ends up dulling curiosity and weakening attention. But a teacher who speaks with confidence, offering the essential points with conviction, awakens the student's own faculties of imagination and reasoning. The trust the teacher places in the student encourages the student to trust themselves, and learning becomes an active process rather than passive reception. The same dynamic is true in everyday communication. When you speak as though your words are sufficient, you empower your audience to meet you halfway. Faith in your words also transforms the way you deliver them. Doubt produces cluttered speech, sentences full of disclaimers, unnecessary repetition, and filler language like, you know, or maybe I'm not explaining this right. But trust in your words produces simplicity and directness. You say what needs to be said and let silence do the rest. Silence, when coupled with conviction, is often more powerful than an excess of words. It gives space for the listener to absorb, reflect, and connect the meaning to their own understanding. This faith is not blind. It grows from experience with your own inner clarity. When you take the time to form a vivid mental picture of what you wish to express, and when you feel the conviction behind it, you can step into speech with assurance. You do not need to force the message, because you know the essence is already clear within you. The more you practice trusting this process, the more natural it becomes. Over time, you learn that words supported by inner conviction rarely need excess decoration. There is also a creative power in faith-filled speech. When you speak as though your words are enough, your audience does not merely receive information. They enter into an atmosphere of certainty. Words backed by trust carry an energy that can shift moods, inspire action, or create agreement. This is why some of the greatest speeches in history were remarkably simple in vocabulary. Their impact did not lie in complexity, but in the unwavering faith of the speaker that the words chosen were sufficient to move hearts and minds. To cultivate faith in your words, begin by examining your habits of communication. Do you often add unnecessary explanations? Do you qualify your statements with phrases that weaken them? Do you speak as if apologizing for your message before it has even been received? These are signs that you are doubting the sufficiency of your own words. Instead, practice stating your message clearly, then pausing. Allow the silence to carry your trust. Resist the urge to rush in with further explanations. Notice how often the listener understands without needing more. This practice strengthens your belief that clarity does not require excess but confidence. Another way to build this faith is to place yourself in the position of the listener. Recall times when you were moved or convinced by someone's words. Often it was not the sheer quantity of words that reached you, but the conviction with which they were spoken. You felt their belief, and that belief became contagious. By remembering this dynamic, you can remind yourself that others, too, are sensitive to the trust you place in your own language. Faith in your words also requires letting go of perfectionism. Many communicators hesitate, searching for the perfect phrase before speaking. But perfectionism is another form of doubt, and it often paralyzes expression. Trust allows you to speak with what you have, knowing that imperfection in form can still carry perfection in essence when it is delivered with conviction. Some of the most memorable words are not polished but authentic, and authenticity is born of trust. Ultimately, faith in your words is a discipline of alignment. It is the alignment of thought, feeling, and speech in a single, confident stream. When you believe that your words are enough, you stop fighting against yourself. Your mind stops scrambling for more, your emotions stop trembling with doubt, and your voice stops hesitating. Instead, all of you works together to deliver the essence of what you mean. That unity is what creates clarity, and clarity is what creates impact. So, how do you articulate your thoughts more clearly than 99% of people? By seeing before you speak, by feeling before you form words, by assuming you are understood, by disciplining your inner dialogue, and by trusting the power of your own voice. Clarity is not just a skill, it is a state of being. And once you master that state, your words will never be forgotten.